Will everyone please join me in Gasho and recite the Nembutsu with me? Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida. Well, someone else. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Dharma School service for the third weekend in February, yes. Oh, I can't believe February is already halfway done. Well, just to continue off of a subject that I briefly mentioned in my previous Dharma talks, I recently am finally in the clear from COVID, which is a wonderful feeling. I still have yet to get some of my energy back, and I'm back to working out a little bit, working out again, and going back to Aikido, and it's a wonderful feeling. But it's also very frustrating because, like I said, my full energy that I had beforehand is still yet to come back, and I'm not the most patient person in the world, and I'm waiting for that to just feel like 100% again. But as we remember, sickness is one of the major truths of Buddhism, right? One of the major sufferings in Buddhism is birth, old age, sickness, and finally death. And sickness is one of the sights that Prince Siddhartha saw when he went out of the gate, right? Remember that story? He goes out of the palace and actually sees the people for the real world, in a sense, not just the pretty world that his father painted for him. He actually got to see some of the not so nice things in life. So of course he saw what impermanence looks like, right, with old age, and then of course he saw vulnerability, which is sickness. Now, I originally was going to ask how many of you have already gotten sick this year, but I don't want to pry too far into your personal lives. But I'm certain for those of you who have gotten sick before can agree with me that it's not a very fun feeling, right? It's not fun. You're probably have to stay in bed. You don't get out to do activities you used to do, you were able to do. You really shouldn't go out to restaurants and go out to eat, right? It really disrupts your life, doesn't it, right? We get into these routines, we get into the things that we're used to. I don't know, maybe for some students it's okay because then you get to stay home, play video games or whatever if you don't want to go to school. But I even think that students, the vast majority of students, Dharma school students, all here present included, would much prefer not to get sick, right? You would much prefer to go to school, even though there are parts of school you don't like, but you would prefer to go to school. You prefer to interact with your friends, see your friends, be able to go out to parties and be able to go out and, to other locations like either the mall, anything like that. But interestingly enough, right, we all from time to time succumb to a type of sickness, whether it's a cold, the flu, hopefully not, but sometimes COVID, and then sometimes even more serious diseases come and we have to tangle with as well. So these are a part of life, as the Buddha said. Now, everybody has their own types of remedies, don't they, right? So when a person gets sick, when you come down with a cold, most of you or some of you break out the can of chicken soup, right? You drink chicken soup, or you have your own medical cure or your own remedy. So show of hands, who has their own sort of like special thing that they bring out when they get sick, right? Like whether it be chicken soup, right? I personally love hot and sour soup, Chinese hot and sour soup. I always get that when I get sick. It helps clear up my sinuses a little bit. But I have some unfortunate news for you, right? Saying Namo Amida Butsu will not prevent you from getting sick. Chanting the sutras will not prevent you from getting sick. So saying Namo Amida Butsu and chanting the sutras, are not going to prevent you from eventually getting sick, right? I actually find it somewhat damaging when there are, religious organizations that claim that maybe the rituals that they do, oh, this will like cure your sickness, or it will cure your, it will cure your disease, right? I think that that is actually damaging, and we have to listen to our doctors when they tell us their advice on what the best way to cure our if we have a cold or if we have a flu, right? We have to listen to them. However, the good news is that Buddhism can help us way through those times of sickness, right? So while the teachings and the teachings and of course like the rituals that we do won't prevent sickness from happening, right? It will actually help us understand it and mitigate it and actually ride the way through it, realizing that I am experiencing some discomfort right now, right? Especially like when you are in the middle of the sickness. But also in most cases, right, like a flu or a cold, if you take good care of yourself, if you stay in, you don't overexert your body, the sickness will pass, right? This too shall pass, right? This, this feeling will eventually, get better. And that's one of the main teachings of the Buddha. What's interesting though is that we as unenlightened beings, from time to time, still have our own little superstitions here and there. And guess what? Even Master Shinran is kind of guilty of this, and he admits this actually in a letter at one point. There was a point in Shinran's life where he did get really, really sick. Like he had a fever, he was kind of bedridden, he wasn't able to get up. And you know what he did? Shinran was so intelligent that he memorized the entirety of the 3 Pure Land Sutras. Now, I'm certain that there are many of you here who know how to chant Jusei Ge from heart, correct? But imagine chanting all 3 sutras just from memory, right? So when Shinran became sick, he started, like he was laying in bed and he was starting to chant like these 3 Pure Land Sutras like constantly. He was going, he was doing all of that, right? And then, interestingly enough, in that time, he actually came to this realization that chanting these sutras while in the sick state is not going to help him, right? It's actually that, the wisdom and compassion of Amida Buddha is already working, right? It's not that it's, I need to chant these sutras in order to cure myself, right? Just the same as when we do these rituals, it's not going to make us invulnerable to diseases and, sometimes the bad luck or the bad things that may happen sometimes, but it helps us mitigate through those times as well. So Shinran realized that chanting the sutras is all well and good, but again, it's not like this protection that protects us from the realities of life either. So why am I saying this? This is because that even though the teachings themselves, right, aren't this impenetrable shield that will give us invincibility, at the same time, it helps us ride through the uncomfortable parts in our life. So that sometimes can be sickness. Other times it can be a disagreement we have with a friend, right? We get into disagreements and we get into arguments sometimes with our dear friends or our family members or our siblings, right? And it can be hard. And we have these disagreements and arguments because we are bonbu. We have sicknesses and we succumb to sicknesses sometimes because we are human. And yet, at the same time, the ultimate truth and reality of the teachings of the Buddha helps us to ride through those uncomfortable times. So these teachings are here for us, like the teachings of impermanence, and the teachings of vulnerability, the teachings of interdependence, right, are there to actually really help us mitigate these times. And I even have to think back on the time of the pandemic, right? When we all had to, unfortunately, stay away from each other for a while, and we had to come up with very, skillful ways to still meet, like through Zoom and everything, right? Why were we so intent on doing this? It's because we realize, right, that interdependence or interconnectedness, right? Every action that we do has some type of reaction to another person. Doesn't just affect us. We do not live in our own little personal vacuums, right? Where a decision that we make, just affects me and me alone, right? The decisions that we make can affect multitudes of people. So when we get sick, right, this is why we say, if you get sick, stay home, because interdependence, right? In Buddhism, interdependence. If I go to school because I really want to see this person or I really want to see this teacher, right? I might run the risk of getting them sick, right? Oh, I had a disagreement with a friend of mine. I was right, they were wrong. Actually, Jodo Shinchu teaches us, right? You may not be right. You may not be correct all the time. You are me, all of us are unenlightened. So therefore, we have to take a step back, think twice, and realize maybe I'm not always correct. So these are what help us go throughout life and live a meaningful life in terms of harmony in Buddhism, and in this particular sense of the word, I suppose, spirituality, right? It's not to say, ooh, I know this particular method that's going to prevent me from getting sick, right? I never get sick, right? Or I'll drink this many gallons of orange juice per day and then I'll never get sick. That's not the point. The whole point of all of this, right, is to realize that the teachings are teaching us that these things, number one, do happen from time to time. Sometimes they are beyond our control. We get sick sometimes. It happens, right? Bad things sometimes do happen in our lives, yes. And of course, this isn't to dismiss, right, the pain and the emotional feeling that we feel during those bad times, right? This is not the point of the Dharma talk at all. Of course, these feelings must be acknowledged and must be given space so we can have this time to, feel out. But then at the end of the day, go back to the teachings of impermanence, interdependence, the fact that we are unenlightened, and realize that we are not always right, that we are vulnerable, and that we do sometimes need to live a little bit carefully, or at least with the consideration of others, which is why we chant the things that we do, and which is why we recite the pledges that we do as well. So with this in mind, Dharma School students, take care of yourselves, monitor your health, see how you genuinely feel, right? And realize that, once again, our actions, the choices that we make, don't always just affect us alone. So thank you very much for joining us for the third Sunday service of the month of February. And it's a wonderful feeling to be back in the temple again. And it's a wonderful feeling to be able to smell the incense, and it's a wonderful feeling to see all of you. So thank you very much. And please join me in Gassho as we close this part of the service. And repeat the Nembutsu with me. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandats, namandats, namandats. You all please join me in Gassho as I read the words of our founder, Master Shinran Shonin. Thus, these passages give clear testimony that the larger sutra reveals the true teaching. It is indeed the right exposition for which the Tathagata appeared in the world, the wondrous scriptures, rare and most excellent. The conclusive and ultimate exposition of the one vehicle, the precious words disclosing perfect, instantaneous fulfillment. The sincere words praised by all the Buddhas throughout the 10 quarters. The true teaching in consummate readiness for the beings of this day. Let this be known. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandats, namandats, namandats. Good morning again, everyone. So this morning's passage comes from the conclusion of the first chapter of Shinran Shonin's major exposition or magnum opus called the Kyogyo Shinsho. And it's a very important passage because once again, it clarifies where Shinran Shonin got his ideas from and based his teachings upon, right? It comes from the larger sutra, which is actually available for purchase at the BCA bookstore, but most importantly, it talks about the beings of this age, the beings of this day. This particular passage or this particular line really spoke to me when I was considering what to talk about for this weekend's Dharma talk for the adult service. Once again, he makes the claim that the Buddha appeared into this world, Shakyamuni Buddha, in order to deliver this sutra for us, right? The Sutra of the Buddha of Immeasurable Light and Immeasurable Life. And this sutra is so important because it talks about the universality of acceptance to the Pure Land and the universality of workings of wisdom and compassion for all sentient beings. So this means that the Dharma of the Amida Buddhas, the Buddha of infinite light and infinite light, still continues to work for beings to this day. Now, as previously stated in the Dharma School Dharma talk, right, saying Namo Amida Butsu is, not going to make you invulnerable to sickness or again to to the sometimes not so nice encounters we have in our lives. But once again, it gives us reassurance that we are still accepted to Amida Buddha's Pure Land, upon our death as well, right? But the fact that wisdom and compassion is reaching us even to this very moment, to this very day. Why should this matter, right? Why actually, if, we think about sometimes, and I often get the question, right? If all of this happens after we die, right? If we go to the Pure Land after we die, why does it matter right now? And Shinran was actually the minister, I think, who flips the script on its head and says that actually all the benefit that we're getting from Amida Buddha's Pure Land happens in the here and now, in this world that we live in, right? The world of delusion and the world of samsara, or the saha world of illusion, right? All of the wisdom and benefit that we think that we're just going to get upon our death is actually occurring at this very moment. And it's when we have these aha or these realization moments of when we can come to the realization that we're not always right, or that we learn something new, and then we realize that we are part of this gigantic cycle of movement that is the turning of this world. And that is when we realize that the wisdom and benefits that come from the Pure Land work for us at this very day. And this is why Shakyamuni Buddha appeared into this world in the first place. Now, we are over 2,000 years departed from when Shakyamuni Buddha walked this earth and gave talks and sutras, right? When he actually talked about things. Yet thankfully, due to many committed disciples and committed scholars over the millennia and over the centuries, we are able to enjoy the words of Shakyamuni Buddha to this day. Yet we should still also turn our attention back to the sutras that we base our teachings off of, which is the larger sutra of the Buddha of Immeasurable Life, the Contemplation Sutra of the Buddha of Immeasurable Light and Life, and the Amida Sutra of the Buddha of Immeasurable Light and Immeasurable Life, or the smaller sutra. Once again, to review a little bit about why the larger sutra is so important, there existed a time when the Buddha was sitting in front of his disciples, and his disciples looked at him, and they noticed that something was very different. You all know when we are with, especially people who are, we respect, and when we sit with people who we really appreciate, we can kind of get in tune with how they're feeling, or we can see if a person is upset, or if we can see if a person's very happy, or, what the mood is, right? The interesting thing was this whole conversation, this whole sutra was started because the Buddha's disciple, Ananda, noticed something very different about the Buddha. And he said, "You're kind of glowing today. What's going on with that?" And the Buddha said, who was the person who talked to you about this, or who actually got you to notice me? And was it a god? Was it a deity? And Ananda said, "No, I just noticed that you were very glowing today. What's going on?" And the Buddha responded, he goes, "Very good, Ananda. You have asked the right question. And now I will begin this talk about the Buddha of Immeasurable Light and Immeasurable Life." And once again, going into the sutra, he talks about how the Bodhisattva path, or the path of Amida Buddha, was put forth to accept all sentient beings to the Pure Land, to save all sentient beings, right? You notice when we talk about, the acceptance of all sentient beings into the Pure Land, there is no prerequisite in that sense. It's like you have to be a man, you have to be a woman, you have to be this, you have to be that, or, you have to be Japanese, right? There's nothing like that. Now, granted, there is a little bit of there is the 35th vow in the larger sutra that it's a little controversial, and I actually do intend on talking about that vow in a later Dharma talk and possibly even a seminar at some point. But ultimately, number 18, the 18th vow, is the vow that we are so indebted to. So Amida Buddha saves all sentient beings. And what he says in this vow is that the countless beings in the 10 directions, all sentient beings, if they say my name or think upon my name even 10 times, are not born in my Pure Land, may I not become a Buddha. It's amazing that we read about these stories of universal acceptance of all beings. And it brings us back to attention to ourselves as well. We ourselves are unenlightened beings and have our own calculations, our own prejudices, our own ways of thinking, and largely governed by a very, very strong ego, where we think that we are always correct or that we think that we're always making the right decision. And yet our minds are clouded by the passions or the bonno or the kleshas that we cling to, that have accumulated through countless causes and conditions. And because of these things, by ourselves, it is very, very hard for us to become enlightened by our own power. Thankfully, Amida Buddha's wisdom and compassion continues to reach us to this very day and to continue to guide us in our lives and really encourages us, in a sense, to act in ethical ways. Now, it's true, there is this acceptance that there are times where we will fall. There are times where we will mess up. There are times where we will make mistakes, and there are times that we are imperfect, right? We lose our tempers, we get impatient, we try to force our opinions on other people. And yet at the same time, it is because of these very imperfections that the Pure Land was made in the first place. And it was important for Bodhisattva Dharmakara, all those countless times and eons ago, to realize that it was important to create this land for all sentient beings to be born in. I think this really inspires me once again to reevaluate my thinking and my understanding of how I approach people, how I view people, how I see people. Times and times again, I see a person either walking on the street or in the store, or I see a person on the website or on YouTube, what have you, and I ultimately come to judgment, right? And I say, ooh, that person's not a very nice person. Oh, that person totally did a bad thing. Look at this, and of course it happens when we watch the news as well. Yet at the same time, I also have to realize that ultimate wisdom and compassion, the teachings from the larger sutra, are for those people too, when you think about it. In fact, it's important for us to remember that wisdom and compassion embraces those who we ourselves may deem to be unworthy or unskillful. So I think this is why, for me personally, the larger sutra is so important for us to return to from time to time. Of course, it can get very deep, and it also speaks in a language that is indicative to the time of 2,500 years ago. But when you read between a lot of those, when you read between a lot of those lines, you see that the message for this, the message for then is still relevant to this very day. With all the technology that we have continued to accumulate and all the modernity that we consider ourselves to be, right, we are still suffering heavily from the human condition as it is. And it is for this very reason that this sutra, that this teaching, that Namo Amida Butsu still exists to this day. We still chant and put our hands together and say Namo Amida Butsu. So it's so amazing to me that these marks in time, whether it be the time of the Buddha 2,500 years ago, whether it be the time of Shinran 800 years ago, to the time up to now, there is still this teaching of Namo Amida Butsu, because we are still unenlightened in this time, and we still must rely heavily upon the teachings of wisdom and compassion. So once again, I would like to close my Dharma talk with the passage, the conclusion of the first chapter of Shinran Shonin's Kyogyo Shincho, or teaching, practice, and true Shinjin. Please join me in Gassho. Thus, these passages give clear testimony that the largest sutra reveals the true teaching. It is indeed the right exposition for which the Tathagata appeared in the world, the wondrous scripture, rare and most excellent, the conclusive and ultimate exposition of the one vehicle, the precious words disclosing perfect, instantaneous fulfillment, the sincere words praised by all the Buddhas throughout the 10 quarters, the true teaching in consummate readiness for the beings of this day. Let this be known. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandaz. Namandaz.